Hey there, Taylor Ellwood here, and welcome to the Magical Experiments live stream. I'm doing this now every 2 weeks. So I think, like you can anticipate me sharing a video like this every 2 weeks, every other week, and as opposed to every week. And I found that that's kind of created a little more balance and a little more focus for me, which is good for you guys. And at the same time, I'm actually going to be probably starting a new live stream channel, a YouTube channel, pretty soon here, where I'm going to be focusing on the work around sacred masculinity and the work that I'm doing with men's work. If you think you're interested in that, I'll share details about that when I get it set up and let you know, and then you can come check that out as well if you want. Today, I thought that we would talk about how to identify the hangups and blockages that occur in your mundane and magical actions. And this is a really important topic, I think, because um, a lot of times we don't recognize that we're caught up in what would be called feedback loops. We have certain patterned responses or reactions that we draw upon in order to navigate life. And these pattern responses and reactions were formed usually early on in our lives, as ways to navigate tough situations where we were, basically, that's what that is. Okay. I was trying to figure out what the little black thingy was there. I moved it anyway. We have these patterned responses and reactions to things, and we need to identify what those are and change them in our lives. And because they were initially come up with as a way to handle situations early on in our lives, and sometimes they weren't even come up with that. Sometimes they're just things that we learned from our parents or family. So one of the books that I've written is how to troubleshoot your magic, which I highly recommend to any and all of you. And if you can get it as an ebook, an audiobook, or a paperback. And it's really a very simple manual for identifying, like, okay, here's here's the magical working that you did. You didn't get the results you wanted. Here's how to figure out why. We always get results with magical work. We don't always get the results we want. And I think it's an important point of clarification. Well, someone might say, well, Taylor, I do a magical working and nothing happened. Well, nothing happened is still a result. It's just not the result you wanted. You need to figure out why nothing happened. And that's one of the things that that's kind of what this lesson is going to be about is figuring that out. And part of what prompted this for me, at least, was that I started reading. I've been reading this book called Magical Riches by Damon Brand. And it was really fascinating to me because one of the points that he was making is like, don't focus on the money. Like when you're doing your wealth magic working, don't focus on the money. Focus on the things that you want to do with the money. And the reason this was so interesting to me is because it's probably the first time I've honestly seen in a book on wealth magic where the author has so explicitly made a really good point about, like, it's not about the money, it's about what you're doing with it. But he does it in a way where he actually identifies the hangups that people have around this, that a lot of times people will have their own resistances and blockages. And it was fascinating to me because I realized I had done a recent wealth magic working. I actually did two of them. And the first working worked out perfectly. I was really pleased with the results. The second working didn't really come together. And I realized why was that in the first one, I hadn't focused on the money. I'd focused on what I was going to do with the money. The second one, I got fixated on the number. I got fixated on that number, and it became a blockage for me. It became a bottleneck for the magical working. And I realized it partway through as a result of reading this book, because it was like, okay, I want to understand this. Why is this happening the way it's happening? And it was really fascinating for me because it helped me to essentially recognize it actually helped me come to a fundamental recognition in the last few days. I've been thinking about this and brainstorming it, and I realized he makes a point in the book. He's like, you should enjoy spending your money. You should enjoy it. And I've been thinking, I've been really sitting with the different experiences that I've been going to, and I've been like, have I enjoyed spending my money? Been really thinking about it from a conscious perspective, because if you're going to fix something, or work through something or change something, you need to first become aware of it. That's kind of a fundamental principle, I think, for this kind of process where you're trying to work through something. And if you don't have awareness around it, it's very hard to change it. You're just going to continue to reactively go in loops. And I realized that I don't always enjoy spending my money. Like when I pay my bills, I'm not always approaching it from a place of gratitude and thinking, man, I'm really grateful for the fact that I was able to pay my heating gas bill this month. And you might think it kind of silly, like, well, you have to pay for it anyway. But seriously, there's something fundamental about being warm that's really nice and enjoyable, that ought to be recognized. Like I earned this. I worked for this, and this is something I'm using it for in order to give me this experience. Fundamentally, what it is that we take our experiences for granted, I think. Or at least speaking for myself, I will say I take my experiences for granted. So like when I'm heating up my house, I take that for granted. But at the same time, having recently gone through an experience where there was like for a day or two, there was no heat in the house because the not the pilot light didn't go up, but like the igniter didn't work, I guess is what it is, for my furnace. I I really came to appreciate that heat in a different way because I'd been cold and I didn't have heat. And so like when the person came and fixed it, I was like, oh my gosh, I have heat again. I was like, okay, this is good. I have heat again. And it made me realize on a fundamental level, like this is something that is worth spending money on. And yet, a few weeks later, I started to take it for granted again. When I went to pay my gas bill this month, I'm kind of like, huh, pay it. I'm like, wait a minute, fundamental shift here. Because of this, I was warm. I'm really grateful for having this. This is something I'm paying for, and I'm grateful for the house that I'm paying for, and I'm grateful for. So what I've decided to start doing and this is kind of part of my self-love practice, but it's a really important thing, is I've decided to start being grateful for the things I spend money for, and not just the things that I clearly enjoy. Like last night I went to a Bohemian opera ball at Old Nick's, which is a local pub here. They had opera, they had burlesque, they had drag queens and kings. It was amazing. Awesome show. Great time. I enjoyed it, and I was more than thrilled to pay for that experience. And I definitely feel like I got more than my quote unquote money's worth. The other night, I went to go to the symphony, and I got to see Prokofiev and another composition by another musician, and I enjoyed that experience as well. And I went out for dinner recently and had sushi, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I'm like, okay, so you do enjoy these experiences. You have no problem paying for that, but you have problems with appreciate. It just started to make me realize, okay, where are the areas where I'm not enjoying? And I realized that fundamentally, the reason why I'm focusing on this is because what I realized, and this is an important thing about identifying hangups and blockages, is that if you recognize that you're trying to do magic around something, right? Oh, great. YouTube froze up on me. I don't know if you guys heard that or not, so I'm just going to say it again. You're starting to do magic, and you don't if you're doing magic around something, but you don't realize that you have a hang up or a blockage there, that hang up or blockage is always going to get in the way of your magical working. Always. Because it's going to be in the back of your head and it's going to kick in and activate. And it's going to kick in and activate because it's a protection mechanism. In my case, my money issues boil down to my mom. She's always had a troubled relationship with money. She hasn't always enjoyed spending it. And I learned that from her. It was always save, 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 be careful, don't spend money haphazardly. Whereas my dad was always kind of like, enjoy your money. Enjoy doing what you're doing. Don't get fixated on. And I wish I'd learned my dad's mechanism. Well, now I'm working on learning my dad's mechanism for it, because I'm like, okay, my dad was right. Enjoy your money, because he just enjoyed his money. He didn't stress about it, or if he did, you know, it was it was one of those cases where he was kind of like, okay, that's he didn't show it. But I began to think about it, and I'm like, I'm going to start changing my approach here and being more grateful for the magical for how I spend my money. Because if I don't change that, then any magical working I do around wealth magic is going to have this hang up in there, and I'm going to have to do. And it's not that I won't get past it. Sometimes I will. Sometimes I'll get results, but I won't understand why until I really get through this. Diona said, sending love from Brazil. Love you. Oh, well, I love you too. Thanks. And I love myself as well. Just as importantly, more importantly, really, you got to love yourself first. See, that's another area that was another area where in my life where I, I had been approaching relationships from the wrong approach, for a long time. And I mean, it made sense. I mean, early on in life, I grew up in a household where like, my dad was never really around, and was basically, he was a narcissist. I don't know how else to really put it. And extremely selfish and self-absorbed, and didn't really care about anyone else other than himself and his own pleasures. And I was kind of just like, if I was paid attention to, it was because I'd done something wrong, and it was he was upset because he had to deal with it, or to tell me what a disappointment I was. So I grew up feeling empty myself, and it made sense that I would try to find. I was trying to find validation from other people in my life for a long, long time, and I realized that I realized, in this last year, that trying to find validation from other people doesn't really work. This got brought home to me very, very clearly in a couple of different ways. And once I realized that, and I started to work on the self-love piece of things, it changed the fundamental direction of how I do things in my life. I started to enjoy life a lot more. And I started to love myself, and I started validating myself, and I wasn't looking for other people to validate me. And this was important because previously, this had been a hang up for me in my life. I was looking for validation from other people. I was looking for someone to make me feel better about myself. The problem is, no amount of validation from someone else could have worked. It didn't work. I know that. I mean, I can look back at my relationships and see why they failed, and I can point to my part of it. And one of the reasons why was because I was codependent and let people walk all over me, and because I was basically being like, well, I value this person's validation over myself. So instead of honoring myself and appreciating myself and validating myself, I was letting someone else validate me. So now I'm like, okay, now I recognize that. And so, when I go to bed at night, I'm telling myself, I love myself, heart, body, mind, and soul. And I say this out loud. I'll be like, I go to bed, I love myself. I love myself, heart, body, mind, and soul. And I give myself to myself each and every day in every way. And I vow to manifest the life that I vow to create the life I want to create, a life of love, a life of doing the work that I feel called to do, et cetera, et cetera. Why do I say these things? It's not just as an affirmation. It is fundamentally a programming of myself to fix, to change, and to create the life I want to manifest. But until I had gone in and figured out what was going on in here and in here and everywhere else, I could not fundamentally make that change. Erica says that's a big problem with the world today. People need to seek validation for everyone but themselves. Yeah, it is a real struggle, and it's just and I would say it's been a big problem for a long, long time. I mean, really, I don't know that I don't know that in general, if we look at the history of the world, that we've ever really, really fundamentally seen a culture where that wasn't the case. I mean, part of the problem, at least in this culture, is we are taught to prize one type of love over any other kind of love, and that type of love is, it's romantic love. We're taught that the love of one may or multiple people, but the love of a person or of a significant other or more than one is the most important thing to ascribe to. The problem with that philosophy or that approach is that what it's doing is it's prioritizing that other person over yourself, and that doesn't work. So what I realized is that when I realized that I had this blockage in my life, mundanely and magically, when it came to not just the relationships I was in with other people, but the relationship I was in within myself, and I changed it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to start loving myself, and that changed things. Uh, Agatha said, "Hi, Taylor. Thrilled to catch you live." Hey, yeah, great. I'm thrilled to have you here. Just as a note for you folks that are joining in here and watching this, I said this at the beginning of the video, but I'll say it again. I'm doing these like every other week now on YouTube. And of course, if you want to catch more material, you guys can always join my Patreon as well. That's where most of my articles are getting homed now. I'm doing some other things there, and I'm going to keep doing other stuff like that. Diona said, it's interesting how the magical path led me to the spiritual truth about the importance of self-love as a basic thing. Well, it definitely can. I mean, I mean, it, for me, that it wasn't really, it wasn't the magical work. I had started this summer to work with um, Inanna and Ishtar and Aphrodite, goddess of love. And I was actually reading the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I realized that the Epic of Gilgamesh was really this interesting story of initiation. Gilgamesh the king is basically like the boy king, and then Gilgamesh becomes the sacred king as a result of the initiatory journey he goes on with Enki and all that. I'm not going to get into all of that right now, but it is pretty important. Yeah, Aphrodite is actually one of my patron goddesses as well, and a pretty significant one in my life. Anyway, but I came to this realization around self-love partially because I decided I needed to explore what my relationship to myself as a man was. Now, the other thing I'm going to mention is that sometime in the near future, I'm going to be starting up another channel here for my site, Inner Alchemy Coach, where I'm going to be talking about the sacred masculine, and that's pretty much going to be focused around that. It's going to be about the men's work. Anyone's welcome to come watch it, and I'll definitely put out an announcement here and elsewhere because I think it's really important work. But yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that too. Lots of changes going on in my life. But the reason why those changes are occurring is because I've identified the areas where I have gotten hung up. And so, in this case with the self-love, when I started applying the self-love practice to myself, what I discovered was, okay, the reason why my relationships with other people aren't working is because I don't love myself. And I have not loved myself. And it was awkward. The first month when I said, I love you to myself, I'm like, I love myself. The first month was really awkward because I didn't believe it. And I felt embarrassed and ashamed. I was like, oh my God, I love myself like that. And part of that was because that's what our society has taught us. Our society has taught us to be ashamed of saying, I love myself. Our society has taught us to be ashamed of seeking self validation in a very real and fundamental way. And part of that is, again, because we have certain societal and cultural standards that say you have to find your validation in other people. But, as Erica noted earlier, that doesn't really work. So when I changed that, and then when I started to really, after the first month, it got easier and I started to believe it. Second month was still a little weird. Third month, it's just like boom, it just slipped in, and I'm like, yeah, I love myself. And like now I'm like all the time I'm happy and I'm grinning and all this other stuff because I do. I love myself. I love myself, and unapologetically, unashamedly, I'm in love with myself. And if other people come into my life and all that stuff, and there have been other people that have come into my life, um, but they'll come in the way that's appropriate for them. Like I've joined a couple men's groups, and I love those men. I love them, and I feel loved by them, and I feel really happy to have that. And then I've joined a couple of other communities and things. And what's happened is that my life has fundamentally shifted because I identified the hangups in my life. I identified at a primal level that my biggest hangup was me not loving myself. Now let's tie this back to the wealth magic that I was talking about earlier. As I was saying earlier, with that, my hangup that I identified, I was doing the magical work around wealth magic, and I had one wealth magic working that worked. It was for the smaller amount. That worked because I could see myself enjoying that money and spending it. The larger amount, it didn't work because I got hung up on that amount. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do with this? It was a good lesson. It was actually a good lesson in two different ways. One, I probably need to work up toward that amount of money. So like next time I'll do a slightly larger amount than the previous one that worked. But two, I need to continue to remember to focus on enjoying the money because money likes to move. Money likes to be spent. So if I'm going to do a wealth magic working, I should fundamentally be enjoying it. And that enjoyment means that I need to enjoy it in every way possible, not just on, oh, I'm going out to an event or I'm going out for dinner or something like that, but that I'm also paying for the heat in my home, or that I'm buying my groceries, or all the other experiences that I'm having. Those are fundamental and important experiences. And if we treat them as experiences that we enjoy, as experiences that allow us to do the things that we want to be able to do with our lives, that's when we start to really create our lives. And that's when we start to get rid of those hangups. The key to identifying these hangups is pay close attention to where you feel resistance in your life. If you're doing a magical work around something and you're trying to get something to happen, pay attention to that resistance. What is the resistance that is occurring here? Because that resistance is going to tell you a lot about what is getting in your way and why things aren't working. And 9 times out of 10, it's usually something with you. I talk about that, as I said, in my book, How to Troubleshoot Your Magic. So, check that out because that's a great example. It's a great book that really walks you through this whole process. And it's one that I'm paying better attention to myself as I continue doing this. Really, as I continue doing the work around self-love, it's kind of blown the door open in my life because I'm changing a lot of different things in my life right now. And the goal really is fundamentally like, okay, I'm going to create the life I want to live. And whether that life includes, anyone else as a romantic significant other doesn't really matter to me at this point. It's like, it's great if somebody comes into my life and I'll welcome it. But what really matters is that I'm living my life on my terms, choosing myself, saying yes to myself, choosing to love myself, and choosing to examine all the things that don't make me happy right now in my life and making changes to them. Now, not all those changes are occurring all at once, but they are occurring. Like I don't, the day job I work at, I don't particularly like it. I don't want to do it for the rest of my life. So what have I done? I started up my coaching practice. I'm I'm working on that right now as a way to help me create another side income stream. I'm working on improving my ad game when it comes to advertising books, using online paid ads, by the way. Not like but I've also applied to graduate school to get a degree in counseling because I want to work with other people. So all of these are things that I've put into motion, and it's changing things for me. And so and don't be surprised that when you start to really create the life you want to create, the life you truly want to live, don't be surprised if you encounter resistance along the way, because we are taught to keep ourselves small. We are taught to keep ourselves and to limit ourselves. Now, ironically enough, the biggest teacher in this, who's helped me the most, has been working with Saturn, because Saturn as a planetary force is about boundaries and limitations. And you might say, well, why would Saturn teach you about that? But why wouldn't Saturn teach us about that? How do we keep ourselves small? How are we keeping ourselves within the limits and boundaries that other people have imposed upon us, instead of defining our own boundaries and limits? And again, this comes back to self-love, because when you start to love yourself, you change your boundaries and limitations, because you start saying, well, what are my boundaries around this? What am I willing to accept, and what am I not willing to accept? What am I willing to say yes to, because I'm saying yes to myself, and then saying yes to other people? See, one of the realizations I had, and this last year really taught me this, is I would say yes to everyone else, but no to myself. And when I started saying no to other people and saying yes to myself, that's when my life became better. There was a little rough for a period there, but fundamentally, I began to realize, like, I'm saying yes to the wrong people. I'm saying yes to everyone else but myself. And now I'm saying yes to myself. And if I do say yes to someone else, it's because I've said yes to myself, because it's something I want. So, yeah. All right. So I think we're going to wrap this up. I've got other things to do today, but I want to thank all of you for being here, that we're here live. And please feel free to like this and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Erica said, people hate change. Example, you start dieting, some pals offer you banned food. You have to pick yourself first. Exactly right, Erica. Exactly right. People don't like change. So I think, like, if you're fortunate enough, you can manifest that change in a way where where what ends up happening is people fall away. What I've noticed is that as I've been doing this work, I've had some people fall out of my life, and I've had other people come into my life, and those people are definitely healthier people for me. They are people that I feel like I can say yes to, because they are people that genuinely seem to care about me, and I genuinely care about them. But they're also people who are good at saying yes to themselves. And that's what I want. I want somebody who knows how to say yes to themselves, and can, as a result, in a very real sense, when they're saying yes to themselves, they're modeling to me, like, okay, this is what it looks like. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a good thing. So very true. Okay, anyway, I'm wrapping up now. I have to say yes to myself here and say no to you guys at this point, but I was saying yes to you guys. I love you all. I love myself. And you know what? All right, I will respond to that. You have to be true to ourselves can be a very lonely path. You know what? I actually disagree with you on that one, Dion. I'm going to tell you why. When you start to really love yourself, and I'm not saying you don't, but I'm going to just say this. This is what I've discovered. When I started to really love myself, that's when I started to realize I'm not alone, because I've got myself. I've got this person that I live with 24/7, and I'm really getting to know him and fall in love with him. And it's when I started to it helped me start falling in love with the city that I'm in now. It helped me start falling in love with the community that I'm forming. And exactly, because people who love themselves are drawn to us, right? And that's exactly it. I started drawing more people to me. I started drawing the right people to me. And the interesting thing was that the people who did fall away were people who really fundamentally do not love themselves. But the people who have come into my life, they love themselves and they say yes to themselves. And that in and of itself has just made such a big difference. So trust me on that, and really explore it from that angle. Change that programming a bit. And I think you'll see a fundamental change that it's not a lonely path, being true to yourself. Being true to yourself is a path of invitation to truly finding the community that you want to be part of. Because when I started really saying yes to myself, that's when I started going out and doing activities and doing things that really mattered to me, and started to truly love myself from a place of empowerment, and started being like welcoming in those other things. All right, folks. I love you all. I love myself. And I will see you next time in 2 weeks.